Hi, I'm Diane Brady, Assistant Managing Editor of Forbes, and this is Forbes Newsroom. I am here with Chloe Sorvino, our food guru, I like to call you, but you are staff writer for food and agriculture, and we're talking about, I guess, kind of the future of meat. I want to start with the fact that you have a book coming out. I never want to ignore that, the talent it takes to get a book. So let's start with that, because that's really been the body of work that you've been building here.
Thank you. Yes, my book draws from 8 years of reporting at Forbes. It's called Raw Deal: Hidden Corruption, Corporate Greed, and the Fight for the Future of Meat. Simon & Schuster's putting it out in early December. I'm really excited. But, it really stems from years of reporting. I was the first journalist to try the Impossible Whopper when it first came out for a Forbes
magazine. Did you like
feature.
it?
I didn't like it, but was it an exact replica? Did I eat a Whopper and an Impossible Whopper side by side? Did that hold up? Yes, I thought it was interesting. I was not, I had my skepticism, but.
Well, there is so much about these alternative meats right now, and I think about it because I have vegetarians in my family. There's the sweet pea, the soy. I mean, give us the sort of the menu of what those alternatives look like, because there's many I wasn't aware of until I spoke to you.
Oh my gosh, there's more than thousands of these really startups globally, and they are all looking to recreate the wheel, but some of them are doing it way more than others, and so it depends on the main protein ingredient that they're choosing. One is soy, very common. That's using a lot of the technology that honestly hasn't changed a lot since like the 1930s.
Not the best for the planet either, if that's your main concern, right?
No, very destructive in terms of pollution and just all the runoff and other water and air quality issues that happen with industrial agriculture and row crops. There's also pea, which is similar. They're a little bit better in terms of cover cropping, but they're still complete monoculture, really, relying on that industrial wheelhouse of farming, which has been destructive over time. And then there's a lot of these newer ones, everything from raw mushrooms or whole mushrooms. There are some that are taking the roots of mushroom called mycelium and creating those into bacon and a lot of different exciting other products. There's a lot of lab-grown meat that's out there right now. You can buy lab-grown meat in Singapore even now.
Have you tried that?
I haven't. That's the one I have been saving myself for. I'll try it when the timing is right, but I'm not running to try it yet, I'll be honest.
Well, because especially right now, meat prices have gone up substantially in the U.S., and yet the overall trends, I know, for meat consumption worldwide, because of other factors, continues to go up. I mean, what is spurring all this investment if the preferences still remain cow on plate?
Right. I think that's what a lot of the excitement and hype around veganism fails to realize, is that meat consumption is still growing a lot globally. And in the U.S., it's also still growing. A lot of these popular alternatives have been put out and been getting excitement and buzz and getting on grocery store shelves have really not been getting the popularity that their investors and their founders have really hoped and wanted for these products. And that's been a little disappointing for, I think, some consumers. I think they're not finding the taste what they need it to be. And I think a lot of people are also not finding the price points they're selling to be. I mean, as you said, meat's gone up a lot. Meat prices in the country right now, even just in the past year, are up double digits. I think it's 13% with inflation. That's higher than almost double what inflation is currently. But it's funny because those prices increasing have actually made the price differences between the alternatives and traditional meat similar.
It's like the oil sands, almost a point at which it becomes economic and be like, okay.
Right, but at the same time, alternative proteins are still way more expensive, and the price parity, they're now having even harder time bringing down the price which they really need to get to be more competitive.
Well, but there is this, whether it's big food or the startups, there is this general understanding that if you're going to talk about sustainability, you have to be moving in the direction toward less animal protein. So what is the trajectory that looks, I don't want to make you like a sports bet or most promising, but where you're sensing the most excitement right now?
Well, I appreciate that because globally there are lots of different projections out there, but almost all the projections still have meat consumption raising considerably around the world. I think most in China, Brazil, parts of Africa. In Europe, it actually has been declining a fair amount. But in the U.S., I mean, people love their steaks. there have never been any presidents or Congress that have stayed in and been voted in again if meat prices have been going up.
Right,
so I
right.
think, we're looking at that this year as well. But I think there's a lot of promise around some of this, like the third generation of alternatives.
Third generation. Is that like cricket? What's third generation?
So cricket is a whole other can of worms, not to make a pun, but crickets actually eat meat. So you can't have a cricket protein. Cricket protein isn't vegan. You can't have cricket protein without feeding them industrial pork. So crickets are very picky eaters, which is something we can talk about another time if you want.
Okay.
But the third generation, I would think, would be more about, like the mushroom-based whole foods. There are several startups right now that are creating, whole cuts of chicken, steak from mycelium, the roots of mushrooms. Fungi are like one of the most underutilized organisms in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of investors right now who are putting all of their hopes on those future of mushrooms products.
What are you hearing out of, I call it big food. I don't know if that is the correct term, but, and I mean big food in the context of the meat companies. When you think about becoming more sustainable in the context of being chicken company, what does that look like? And is there anything that actually is moving the needle in a positive way? Because we know organic farming actually is difficult to do at scale. So are there other ways that they're perhaps supplementing or doing things differently to be more sustainable?
Organic farming is super difficult to do at scale, and it's unfortunately the financial system right now has put the onus on making that transition on the farmer, and it takes 3 to 5 years for an organic farmer to transition to actually being organic, and at that time they have to still sell their products into the conventional market, not at the right price points that they're making all that investment for. So it's really tough, and there's a lot of newer loans out there that are trying to make that easier. But I think that is honestly a really important point, because meat companies have been making the most profits they've made in a really long time. Their profits have been through the roof because prices have been up so high, and because they've been able to retain profits so much. And that is a very clear place where a company like a Tyson could put their money where their mouth is and invest in actually having organic farming for their corn and their soy, which is the main ingredient that feeds their chickens, and which is where the main climate and environmental destruction is coming from. They're not. They're doing very small tests across the board. Like more generally, more meat companies are doing some tests here or there, but no one is having significant, meaningful change. No one is going out and saying, hey, we're going to commit half of our profits, or maybe 20% even of our profits from last quarter, and putting that towards trying out more organic farming, or investing in less herbicides and pollution being used to make that. It's because at the end of the day, these companies still really want yields, and it all kind of comes back to that return to shareholder value. I mean, most of these companies are public. Most of these meat companies have shareholders to respond to, and they have to increase their profits. They have to work very hard to do that.
In times of climate change, I'm sure you fear the volatility more, and including political volatility in the Ukraine and such, right?
You would think that, though, but I don't think that these companies really had that understanding that the reckoning really could be coming until very, very recently. I mean, until 2020, a report came out in 2020 that only 2 of the top, I believe, 30 plus meat companies had at that point done a climate scenario analysis, which is comparatively the oil and gas industry, probably half of those companies had done it at that point, because meat really was enjoying being able to hide in the shadows a bit and not have to have that reckoning that I think is very much here. So we'll see.
So Chloe, tell me about, we've seen this dire state right now for the alternative meats. Is it from an investment perspective primarily, or how do we measure success or failure in that category, since there's so many?
I think we really have to measure success based on actual adoption. And right now, these alternatives just aren't seeing the adoption they need to see. And on top of that, sales were going up each year, 5 years in a row. Last year was the first time they went down. Same with investment, up 5 years in a row. Last year was the first number that was less than before. And, on top of that, there were 78 million households that tried plant-based proteins in 2020, and only 79, about 1% more in 2021.
Well, I remember McDonald's, Burger, like a lot of the fast food restaurants did their foray into
They tried.
this, and then it, like the McRib, vanished from the menu, maybe to come back. But that must be a real sort of, emblematic canary in the coal mine, so to speak, as to consumption. Because if you don't win them at McDonald's, you don't win them in the store.
And McDonald's did just pull its Beyond Meat test, which is kind of what Beyond Meat was really, really banking on would be pushing it through this next year.
Now, tell me about the state of Beyond Meat, because that and Impossible. Those are the two giants of the space, basically. How are they doing?
I would say it's struggle city right now, to be honest. Beyond Meat was the first one to go public. Impossible is still private. But when Beyond Meat went public in 2019, it was the first food company that had gone public, the first maybe 5 in the past decade prior. And so it soared. It hit 200% more than its first few weeks. Investors were all getting super, super excited. It's what drove a lot of the frenzy and investment into a lot of these other alternatives, like copycats, like dozens and dozens of these startups. And, I was one of the first journalists to really talk about how much of the stock was being shorted. This year, it hit the highest short figure ever. More than a third of all shares were shorted. And the stock's pretty much just collapsed because they haven't been hitting this adoption. McPlant at McDonald's, their test has been failing. McDonald's is pulling it back now. And they really needed a lot of significant fast food buy-in to get the numbers they need, the volume to keep it moving, and they didn't. And so that's put Impossible, honestly, in an interesting position, because Impossible has raised billions of dollars and has been essentially toying and touting and saying that they're going to be potentially going public. Pat Brown, the CEO, has told me himself that we'll definitely be going public one day, and we're still waiting for that. And I think what's happening with the markets, what's happening with Beyond Meat, it's putting a lot of folks wondering if it's going to happen or not.
Well, if you put the two of them side by side, is one resonating more with the public than the other?
It depends. I think Beyond Meat is going for that non-GMO, less additive marketing, which I think makes sense for the consumer group. Impossible is going like full tech and, maybe pulling back a little bit from advertising its team as much, because it isn't honestly as...
A lot of chemicals.
And it just really isn't as kind of landmark, and it really isn't as exciting as they think they try to make it out to be. It's a pretty common ingredient, all considered, that a lot of other folks are able to manufacture. But they're definitely going full Silicon Valley tech, and you're starting to see that dichotomy playing out, and the customers picking and choosing more.
Me end on an almost existential question, because when a lot of the vegetarians that I grew up with, aunts, uncles, they didn't try to find a meat substitute that was like meat. They were eating nut loaf, and they were eating things that weren't trying to replicate a burger. When you look at what's happening in this space, and you are probably the world's expert, given all the work you've been doing on your book and such as well, is that really, because it feels a little bit like this holy grail that nobody's quite got yet?
It is the kind of tell-it-old question, because vegetarians never liked meat in the first place, right? Like most people who are
they
vegans
don't want mock chicken.
don't like
Tofurkey.
meat.
Yeah.
They're vegetarians, they're vegans because they wanted to be like that. But there is this newer group of folks who are interested in eating less meat and being more vegetarian leaning because of the climate and because of all these grave existential questions that we all face. And I think it's really important to say that Asian cultures have put out meatless meat products for centuries, for generations, thousands and thousands of years in the Philippines and Taiwan and China. And those were never had to be replacements. Tofu is tofu, setyan is setyan. And at the same time, though, I do think there are folks, and particularly investors, who believe that there's a reason that tofu and setyan haven't gotten more of those meat eaters, right? And that's why there's this need for technology to come in. Although I think, if you're doing new foods based on technology that are still just using the same manufacturing from the 1950s, you're still going to get the same results. And I think that's why a lot of customers aren't adopting these products as fast as people were hoping they would be. But it sucks because, time's really running out to make these changes, and the climate change is really here for food and going to make it way harder to grow as much food as we need, and to feed people as affordably and accessibly and as nutritiously as we need to.
So one other question, which is, I know that we always do talk about the innovators, the entrepreneurs. Who's on your radar as doing something interesting? They might not be there yet, but you think, well, that's one to watch.
I just saw an advertisement actually earlier today for one of our 30 under 30 companies that was on our list in 2017, a long time ago. They're called Do Good Foods, Do Good Chicken. It's a brand that's honestly rolling out very quickly on shelves right now. Is it
actual chicken?
It is actual chicken. And so they're coming at this question from still going full chicken. They think people are not going to fully go towards these alternatives, but chicken needs to be made better. And the feed, what they're made, right, the feed that can be so destructive environmentally has to change. And so they're upcycling from a bunch of different industrial waste streams, essentially the waste, and they're feeding the chicken that. And so these chickens are essentially combating food waste. And now they're putting all these advertisements out. Do Good Chicken.
That is a branding challenge. That's a branding challenge.
And they're going for it because they're calling it Do Good. They're trying really, really hard. We'll see if it ends up working out. I'm not really sure if consumers are going to like it.
Chicken has consumed your waste, and now you can have it.
So now you can feel guilt-free about this waste-free chicken. But yes, I mean, it's all very. We're in the very absurdist. We have a company coming to our sustainability summit next month, right? That has been literally commercializing and getting investment behind the concept of bringing 1967 NASA research that was around the theoretical concept of creating single-cell organism meat from the air in a spaceship and creating that into a commercial product.
Powdered Tang on as your orange juice substitute back then, right? So, and does it work? It works, right? This is
they have not put anything out for the grocery stores yet, but they've hit the point where they're making the product. They've figured out how to make this research actually work. It's called air protein. It is like air meat, literally, and we'll see. But we're getting to my point is we're getting to the absurdist.
But yet,
big solutions are needed for the big problems.
I can't wait for the taster's menu and all this. So, Chloe Sorvino, thank you very much.
Thank you.